Welcome to the Sharing the Heart of the Matter podcast. Join us as we celebrate the brilliance of authors, storytellers, and creators. I'm Win Leon, and in this inspiring episode, Vicki Atkinson and I are talking with author Bob Conlon. Bob has written a fantastic book, Celtic Knot, featuring the story of his grandfather, Tim Conlon. With Chicago as the backdrop, we get to follow Tim's life after he was orphaned at age 8. Tim's pluck, smarts, and ingenuity will hook and amaze you as you follow along with his progress. We asked Bob about how he researched this book that brings so many historical events like the Chicago fire and Eastland boat disaster to light. Bob tells us how his career as a lawyer helped him to write this book. We get such an incredible sense of family and community in Celtic Knot, and talk with Bob about how important that was to his Irish immigrant family and the community overall. You will love this book for its roots in history, the ingenuity of the main character, and the way Bob has paid homage to family, love, and a life well lived. Join us for a fascinating episode featuring a fantastic author writing about family, history, and secrets. We know you'll love it.
Hello, Bob Conlon.
Good morning. How are you, Victoria? Good to see you.
We're good. Win and I are so excited. We've had this scheduled for a few weeks, but we're so excited to talk to you about your brand new book, Celtic Knot. It is beautiful in so many ways. And in our pregame, we've been talking about what a page turner it is. But before we jump into all of that, we would love to know, from your brilliant author's perspective, tell us about the story about writing this book, because it's largely about your grandfather's life, but there's so many other elements. So how would you describe it?
Wow, thank you for your kind comments, and also good morning, Win. And it all started. It's been a lifetime of stories. The Conlons come from a great line of storytellers. I just remember as a little boy, we would have big family gatherings on Sundays, typically with aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, siblings, just a massive group. And the drinks would be pouring, not for me because I was a youngster. And what was lovely about it, there were just artists, singers, dancers. It was just alive, and people would love to perform, and the younger kids, and do little dances and whatnot. And then there would come the time, Grandpa, tell us a story. And he was a quiet man, not a braggart at all, and he hated people who did brag. But if you got him going, he could talk, and he could talk and talk and talk and talk. So I heard all this wealth of just wonderful, lovely stories. And his story began, if I could just give you a little bit of a reference here. He was born in 1877 and sadly became an orphan at the age of 8 in 1885 in Chicago. And Chicago, boy, oh boy, what a town that was. It was in a transition post-Chicago fire and during the Great Rebuild to ultimately make it one of the greatest cities in the world. And it was a wide open town. It was a dangerous town. And he, again, just woke up one day and was stuck in an orphanage in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. I changed the name to protect a really nice orphanage that is still here today. I didn't feel like I needed to roll that out from an old story, but he was in an orphanage, and there was an ill-intending priest that was part of that orphanage. And at the age of 8, he had the smarts and the guts to escape with one of his buddies, and he returned to the city of Chicago, the only town he knew and loved, and left all his family and friends. And he lived on the rough and tumble streets of Chicago in 1885. And what that man went through to survive on a daily basis, I don't know that we'll ever know, but I tried to capture all that. And then as time went on and he survived and grew up, his life intersected with so many important historical events, which
Mm-hmm.
I incorporated into the story. But back to your question, Victoria, I this wonderful story needed to be told. And age-wise, I statistically will be the last person alive who actually met him. He lived
Wow. I mean, that's a burden for you to carry, not to like put that on you, but I'm so glad that you've written what you have because it was
Yeah,
kind of your
thank you.
obligation.
I sure felt it was. I did.
Yeah.
I felt, and it's interesting, Victoria, that I just immersed myself in his life for the better part of a year, reading and researching and writing it. And when it was over, the writing part, and then we went to the business end and got it published. But I missed
Mhm.
talking to him. It felt
Yeah.
like to not get
Yeah.
too out there, but I felt
Yeah.
like the ghosts
Mhm.
were, talking to
Yeah.
me, and
Yeah.
I really got close, probably closer than I ever have to the family. But anyways,
It's
so that was
amazing
that
what
was the
he,
motivation, and really wanted to. I hope people who read that are inspired to do the same. And
Yeah.
you don't have to write a book, but record it. I got a
Mm-hmm.
lot of stories from my mother, who passed away a year and some change ago at the age of 93.
Mm-hmm.
And she loved and had a great relationship with her in-laws, and it was just a wealth of information. And thankfully, I was blessed to be able to, my weekly trip out to the retirement home out in Algonquin, we would sit and talk, and then, we'd spend 15, 20 minutes talking about my grandfather, her
Yeah.
father-in-law. So it was great to record all that. And boy, at the end of the day, reflecting on it, and I don't know that I appreciated it when I started to embark on this, ladies, was the debt of gratitude I think all of us owe to our ancestors, and the sacrifice and resilience they undertook to
Mm-hmm.
make a better life for themselves and their family.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's amazing. Tim only had a second grade
Mm,
education. I mean, and
yes,
his self-learning, I mean, resilience, as you just said there, it's just so inspiring.
right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And he was blessed with high intelligence. And again, reflecting, one of the burning questions I had was, how the heck did he make it through?
Right.
All this.
Mm-hmm.
And if you forget, I have a 7-year-old granddaughter, an 8-year-old, you think, wow, how did he do it? And
Yeah.
I think it was, to answer that, I think it was his is what you're alluding to, when is he was just blessed with a high
Yeah.
IQ. I think his chops really
Right.
got him through a lot.
At street smarts, and
Yeah.
then he did all the reading and to
Yeah,
get
he
the book
kept up.
smarts.
He
Yeah.
really did keep
Hmm.
up, and that was an interesting,
Mm-hmm.
after the fire, the Chicago Public Library was um was formed, and the really, after the fire, not only the other parts of the country, but other nations were so supportive, and through all these volumes and volumes of books, and the guys in Chicago were like, what the heck do we do with this? And they created the Chicago Public Library. Lucky for him,
Yeah.
and he
Hmm.
did keep up. But the other part, just beyond street smarts, that he got, just being a street, a Chicago kid running around. And that was fun to write that part too. Just before he was in the orphanage, he and his gang, and I don't mean it in a gang way, but just his
Right.
group of friends. And so I do think he got a little bit of street smarts. That might, whether that's nature or nurture, who knows? But I also think he was a tough hombre. He just, not everybody's like that. He just
Yeah.
rolled with the punches every day of his life. And when he had setbacks and lost loved ones, his wife of decades and decades, and his children that passed before him, he never really cried in public. He just moved on, and that's just how he was wired. And I think that helped him go too.
But what's so, I think, remarkable, I think, for Win and I both, and I love that you said that you kind of had this vacant spot in your heart when you stopped researching him, that he
Mm,
became more distant because you hold him close. And then there was that separation. But there were so many things in the book, Bob, where Tim's personality came through. And it seemed to me as I was reading that he just had a really good internal compass about where to put his time and energy. And he didn't waste time on things that he somehow knew weren't going to benefit him or the people that he loved. And, he was an inventor and, like Wynn said, he was just very, wise about the world. But then he also had this, and I'm curious about your thoughts about his like soft and mushy exterior as a poet, because some of the things that you included in the book, there's one, and it's such a story about how your, grandma ended up in California, but,
Oh,
writing to her then, and then, when she passed away, the poetry and letters, but he had this like super soft exterior, but it seemed like he was very judicious about how and when and where he shared that. Does that sound accurate to you
oh
as you
wow. No,
discovered?
no, that's really quite insightful for you to pick up on that from reading the book. I really appreciate that. And yes, I appreciate those nice thoughts as well. Yeah, that was, I had heard and I heard him read some of his poems by memory. That was another thing he was blessed with, that
Wow. Yeah.
photograph. Oh my God.
Oh my gosh.
He could rattle off some of the, because a couple of those poems go on a little bit and they're beautiful. I would say, to be as objective as I can be, I think the poems were really good and amazing when you have the backstory. They weren't great. They weren't, Robert Frost, but they were wonderful,
Yeah.
plain speak. And
Mm.
anyways, I had heard about it, and then my cousin, who is in her 80s, who knew him quite well, her name is Sue Rogers, and she was the archivist for the family. Thank goodness. She gave, she said, I got all those poems, and I almost fell out of my chair. And so I got this
Yeah.
box of, and read through it, and it was great. It helped me navigate because some of them were dated, some of them weren't. But
Yeah.
it helped me with the chronology and helped me get into his head of what he was thinking. For example, it was actually dated, the poem that he wrote after the Iroquois Theater about being mad at politicians and what
Mm-hmm.
scumbags crooked politicians are. Talk
Mm.
about,
Timely,
some, yeah,
timeless. Yeah.
some things never change, I guess.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, my head exploded. I go, oh my God, that's exactly what he's talking about,
Yeah.
And so it was fun to be able to,
Yeah.
mine that and then intersperse it. And just an interesting aside, I think, before I was still working and have, it was just a thought about writing the book. My oldest son was married, whatever, I'm terrible at that, maybe 6 or 7 years ago. And one of the poems, because my sister was the officiant, it was a beautiful wedding out in, you know, Deer Valley, Utah, but an outdoors. So just a beautiful setting. And my sister read a poem about the California poem when they were separated. And that part, I think the love and how he missed her. He picked up her picture and he kept it in her pocket. The whole thing is in the book. But my son, who was a lawyer working in Chicago at the time, and it wasn't ideal. My daughter-in-law was in California in medical school. So it was, or actually in her residency. And so they were apart and would see each other, and it was really challenging, but it was just so, wow, that's exactly what he was living through at the time.
Right.
Sorry for the
Yeah.
detour there
Right.
on a very
No.
personal story, but it maybe got my wheels spinning a little bit like, wow, there is something there.
Yeah. Well, and imagine what Tim is feeling, right?
Yeah.
Taking that and bringing him into the present, with family that he will never meet. But funny how circumstances in life repeat,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
The if you don't mind, a perfect time to talk about what the Celtic knot means, I think,
Yeah.
to your point, that's the symbol on the book. And a lot of people, Victoria and Wynn, yeah, there you go. You've probably seen that, would be my guess. A lot of people are like, oh yeah, I know that. A lot of people know it as the Trinity knot. The ancient Celts called it the Triquetra. And I researched the heck out of that thing, and that was found in caves 2000 BC. I mean, it's been around forever. And
Yeah.
then St. Patrick, being the clever guy that he was when he was on his mission to convert people to Christianity, and I think it's 400s, 500s. He wanted to use a symbol that these people would be familiar with, so they
Yeah.
could say, "Oh, okay." And of course, the three prongs are the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And the ancient Celts, which not many people know. There you go. What that is, it's a continuous symbol, which is really important. And they viewed it as the three phases of every being's life, whether it
Yeah.
was a deer in the woods or a person or a rabbit. There's birth, there's life, and spiritual afterlife. And the big circle is everything and everyone is connected. And I just think that's beautiful. And
Yeah.
that's really what the
Yeah.
story is about. And, I then, at one point in my life, I read quite a bit about the Zen religion. I'm a proud Roman Catholic and a believer and all that, but I did read quite about Zen, and there's some beautiful writings there. And it's just so interesting, I have the whole analogy about waves in the ocean and how some waves are
Yes.
big and dramatic and some you barely detect. And they all are individual and unique in size and scope and how dramatic they are. And they have a beginning and end. And when they
Yeah.
end, they don't disappear. They
Mhm.
go back into the water and
Mhm.
reconnect with all the
Right.
water molecules
Yeah.
and form another wave. And so that's what Zen believes. And I'm thinking, wow, that's certainly what the ancient Celts were, I think, trying to say. Maybe not as beautifully as that. It's just kind of
Mhm.
interesting. And to your point, we are all connected. And as
Yeah.
generations move on, it's nice to remember where you all came from,
Yeah.
right?
And we just did a
Yes.
podcast with someone recently, Danny Miller, who wrote the
Mhm.
book, which was The Way of the Wave,
Mhm.
about going with the
Oh,
flow, which is talks
Yeah.
about everything being connected.
I would love to read that. And
Yeah.
I hope I did
Yeah.
my
Oh.
dissertation there on Zen somewhat accurately.
Yeah.
No, it was perfect. And
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
fits,
Hmm.
with
Yeah.
everything that you wrote because you were
Yeah.
on a mission to make sure you were honoring all of that, but
Yeah.
also keeping so many things alive.
Yeah, that's nice to hear. Thank you
I
very much.
love the wisdom that Tim uses, especially as he goes into Little Cheyenne. Things that he
Mm,
got from his dad, and
Mm.
yep.
a few of them: never trust anyone you meet after midnight, right? Never
Yeah.
play with cards
Yeah.
with a guy named Doc.
Isn't that hilarious? Yes.
Never
So
eat
good.
at a place called Ma's.
Those were the
Yeah.
three big rules.
And this one: look for the man the world calls wise and hold on to him with a grip of steel.
Yeah.
Yes. Isn't that
So good.
something?
And it seems
So
like
good.
what you've done in this book is do that. You've held on to Tim's wisdom and
Yeah.
I sure hope so. Thank you for
Mhm.
saying that. And thank you
Yeah.
for lifting those. Yeah, those are great. They're funny, but there's
Oh,
Yeah.
did ever eat at
yeah.
a place called
Right.
Ma's?
Yeah.
How he came up
Yeah.
with that, I don't know. But I got to tell you that bit about not trusting anybody you meet after midnight. I could have used
Yeah.
that wisdom a few times.
I think so. And we love when we're reading something and they're heavy nods, right?
Yeah.
Smiles and
Yeah.
heavy nods. You're like, oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
that's
and
so good.
he had so many of those, and some that I really couldn't slightly Peter, even a
Yeah.
little bit more than PG. So we'll
Yeah.
just leave it.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Well,
Yeah.
I wanted to touch on not just the enriching of family,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
community. You said
Oh, yeah.
something in an interview recently with your publisher, Rick Camphor at Eckhart's Press. You said the Conlons grew up with hundreds of neighbors living on
Hmm.
top of each other in Chicago, with rows of modest homes situated 5 feet on either side. Everyone knew everyone else. If a neighbor saw someone's children in trouble, they'd drop everything and help them. The neighborhood gave everyone a sense that they were part of something larger than themselves. And then you go on to say that fully embracing America, but never forgetting, Irish roots in your
Hmm.
family's case. And, right now there seems to be such a nostalgic and necessary yearning for community and safety and all of that. So when we lift your book up, Bob, to be an example of you can do that. You can have that agency. You can do that too. Is that a little overwhelming for you because you were just writing about the Conlons? it is
Yeah,
an
well,
important message right now.
it really is, and I tell you, it's really an important message and near and dear to my heart. And I
Yeah.
really wish we could get back there. And I know we can, right? It starts with, I'm sure you're all familiar with Maya Angelou and
Mm.
her, uh, what is it called? Human Family. I noted
Mm-hmm.
this down. And in the
Yeah.
poem, she says, "We are more alike, my friends, than we are
Mm.
unalike." And that ties into the Celtic knot. We're all connected. We really are.
Yeah.
And we were all come from immigrants. We Nobody's family other than, well, even
Yeah.
the Native American Indians. We all came from somewhere.
Yeah.
With immigration, again, we talked about crooked politicians. Immigration, you can't pick up a newspaper without getting
Mhm.
overwhelmed with people very emotional on all sides talking about issues presented with immigrants. And I think indisputably it made our country what it is today. And it started with, and I tried to do it justice, Victoria. You hit the perfect part from the book to introduce this subject, which is when my ancestors left from Ireland, and you can fill in the blank. When my ancestors left from somewhere in South
Right.
America or Central
Yep.
America or anywhere in Europe. Now the African Americans, they didn't come here on their own volition, but they got here, and
Mm-hmm.
then once we're all here, they missed their. Can you just think about, upping and leaving from winds in the beautiful town of Seattle, just getting up and leaving in a pretty quick fashion, and not that you had a choice, and everybody you knew and everybody you loved, family and friends, you just get up with your core family and leave and jump on a boat and go to a place you've never been before. And oh, by the way, all you could bring is one steamer trunk of chattels and things you wanted to bring along. That is just astonishing to me. And so what people did, and I'm probably stating the obvious here, but they wanted to hang on. They wanted a lifeline to their country they miss so much. And so that's
Mm-hmm.
why they would, embrace the culture, keep the culture alive through songs and art and stories and heritage, and live with people that shared that, because they wanted to. Okay, we're not in Ireland, we're in the west side of Chicago, and that's great. And the beauty of it was, the people, instead of missing their home that they abruptly left, they're part of something that's certainly bigger than them, and they wanted to make not only their family proud but their neighborhood proud.
Mm-hmm.
And this isn't just, oh, the good old days. Look,
Mm-hmm.
the good old days had all sorts, as we're talking about, they had huge problems, but
Mm-hmm.
that was a fact. If you knew if your kid was out doing something stupid and the neighbor saw it, they'd grab him by the neck and say, "Don't do that."
Yeah.
And they may or may not tell your parents, but they would regulate. But on the other
Mm-hmm.
hand, if one of the kids, got in a play or was a good athlete or got elected to something, they would be as proud as if it was them or their
Mm-hmm.
family. And so, we became a great country because all of the wonderful qualities and cultures that came from literally all around the world are all here today. And it would be wonderful if we could get back to that, not pockets and ghettos of all Irish and we only
Right.
deal with the Irish and the
Mm-hmm.
Italians and the whoever
Mm-hmm.
such, but make it more of a, national community. Look, we have such a horrible state of affairs, so divisive. And I really believe, not, and I'm not getting political, but to your point, I think if you have the top 20 issues and you draw a bell curve, I would say that 80% of the people are basically on the same page on
Mm-hmm.
80% of the issues. And then you got the outliers here and the outliers
Yeah.
there. And look, the outliers, we're in a country which is great. You can be an outlier. And I
Mm-hmm.
respect both opinions, as opposed to becoming tribal. And it's like, if you're here, we hate you, and vice
Mm-hmm.
versa. And that's all don't like it. But we have it in us. I still have faith in in our country and our community that we will get back there because we're all part of something that's fantastic, and we really, I hope, carry down that path.
But I think what you've written invites us to reflect on for so many of us, our immigrant ancestors' stories, and that peaceful coexistence is possible. Like you said, in those, rough and tumble communities, life wasn't perfect,
No.
but, food and family and safety and shelter, all of the immigrants had common bonds and concerns. I think so much of what you've written, you also do such a great job, Bob. I swear you were like a historian in another life. I'm not sure how many lives you've lived, but when
Yeah,
we were talking,
it's
in
nice of you to
the
say.
pregame, about some of the historical events, but you do such a good job in the book putting the reader in the time and place when things weren't perfect. Horrible things
Mhm.
happened, but those resilience threads. So how did you do all of that? Because you're
Oh,
still telling the story
oh.
of the
Mhm.
Conlons, but
Mhm.
within a backdrop of things that were real and true and obviously beautifully researched. That's a
Mhm.
lot of work.
Wow, thank you. And I wanted to do it and do it right, so I did spend. And my personality is just, I used to drive my partners nuts on paying attention to details. But it really, I mean, it stems from being a lawyer. And yes, I was in civil litigation, which is kind of an oxymoron. Yeah, I was
It's a
in
good one.
commercial litigation where,
Yeah.
companies fighting one another over money. But you would have incredibly sometimes complex set of facts, and the one side would take this vision of what happened and the other side would take another. And so it was always good to try to start with, okay, clean slate, what the heck happened? And it
Mm,
would take a lot of time looking through documents, talking to people and researching, etc., and then coming up with the story and then trying to put your client's position within that story. And, took my job and my profession quite seriously.
yeah.
You can't make stuff up. You get
Right.
in big
Right.
trouble. I would always tell the young lawyers coming in, facts are facts. We don't bury facts. We deal with the fact and try to
Mhm.
make the best argument with that fact. But, you can have really dire consequences for yourself professionally and for the client if
Yeah.
if you make stuff up. So I was always able to research, legal research. I would be horrible at it right now. The young folks with technology can do it way better than me. But, at a time when I was growing up through the profession, we really rolled up our sleeves and dug in there. And so that part was, really enjoyable for me and really
Yeah.
fun. And I found myself, again, just like I tried to describe, you look at who, for example, the Eastland disaster.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
How did that happen? Well,
Mm.
there's a whole host of things. At this time now, I have a personal view of what the heck happened, but there's a lot of theories of why it happened, how it happened.
Our listeners and viewers
Sure.
about the Eastland disaster for those who haven't read yet? They
Yeah,
will. Yeah.
Mhm.
absolutely. It was a horrible, horrible event. And my grandfather, the connection to the story was he worked at Western Electric. Actually, he was in a research and development area, as I think Wynn mentioned, or you did, Victoria, that he had 22 patents with a second grade education. Just wow. I,
Amazing.
I don't I don't think that happens anymore in this world.
Right.
But anyways, they had the yearly annual picnic from the Hawthorne Works, which used to be in Cicero, west of the city. And um, when Cicero is, a very blue collar town at the time, mostly Polish, but Germans and also, but that mostly Polish and Germans. And they had this Hawthorne Works with 20,000 people working there, three shifts, just massive. And it's all gone now, but they were the manufacturing arm of AT&T, Bell
Mhm.
companies. I don't know if they actually made telephones, believe it or not, but all the parts and the pieces. Anyways, my grandfather finally decided to go, and one of 5 boats would take the year that it happened. If I didn't mention already, July 24th, 1915. So the 110th anniversary of that awful event is right around the corner. But they were taking the people from the Chicago River at by the Clark Street Bridge. They get towed out into Lake Michigan, and as the crow flies, go 38 miles to Michigan City, Indiana, and have a lovely day with music and dancing and picnicking and events for the kids and so on and so forth, and then come back. And that was it was just, for these people, they loved it. And it got bigger and bigger every year. I think this was the 5th or 6th annual one. And the first, a couple hundred, then a couple thousand, then this time 7,000 people. So they had 5 boats, and Eastland was one of them. And I go into painstaking detail, but to cut to the end of it, there were over 2,500 people on the boat, which was capacity, and it was in 20 feet of water in Chicago River, tethered to the moor by the wharf, 20 feet away from the wharf. It tipped over, and 844 people died. And just, just so sad on so many levels.
And you compare in that, as you go through that, how many people died versus other disasters.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
No,
significant.
It really is, Win. Just looking at my notes here, the Titanic, which happened just a few years before, 829 passengers died. Now, they had a massive crew of 694 who were people too, but I'm just saying, as far as passengers are concerned, actually more passengers died on the Eastland. And then the other biggie was the Lusitania, which happened 10 weeks before the Eastland. We all know about the Lusitania. It was torpedoed in the Atlantic, and 785 passengers died. And Ted Wachholz, who is just a wonderful man, and he is the head of the Eastland Disaster Historical Society, and he provided a wealth of info. He and his website provided a tremendous wealth of information for me and the book. He His view is why nobody really knows about it, and it's sad. It was because it was a bunch of blue collar people, nobody rich and famous.
No Vanderbilts.
Right, exactly. Exactly. No unsinkable Molly Brown, whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Right.
Maybe I missed that name. But yeah, so that part really struck, and it's like, wow. Now, when it happened, there was a great outpouring from all around the world, really, but they're quickly forgot, and it was
But not anymore. Not anymore.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm trying to bring it
lifting them up.
back. Yeah, and really one of the reasons why it was so top heavy and just, flipped over was because of the Titanic. There was lifeboats for all law passed by Woodrow Wilson, that you had to have a lifeboat to accommodate 75% of the people on the boat. And they retrofitted to comply with the law. Nobody used, I mean, the boats were worthless, but they were real heavy, and it didn't make sense. It was an already unstable boat, made it really unstable. And so just,
ridiculous, horrific irony there.
Yeah,
right?
isn't it? Yeah. Oh,
just
for sure.
awful.
For
But
sure.
one of the things that we so love about your book is everything that you just described, right? And digging deep, because history is exciting and history is important.
Sure.
But you also said that in more than a few places, you sprinkled in some of your own imagination in order to tell this story. So your book is so unique in that way. And, Win and I love it because you're balancing those two things, a historical peek at things that were happening. But in order to tell the story, of the Conlons, you allowed a little bit of that like Irish magic in.
That's nice of you to say. Thank you. Yes, for sure. What I tried to do, there's a lot of gaps from my research, and there's a lot of gaps from the investigation, if you will, of looking at my grandfather's poetry and letters to his wife and family and friends and the stories, and then interviewing everybody alive who knew him and his memory. There are some gaps, I wasn't there. And so what I try to do, instead of just completely make up stuff completely out of nowhere, I try to keep it intellectually honest and use what I did know plus what I knew about him and the characters to make sense, to connect the dots.
Yeah.
And do it in a way that is interesting. So I think
Yeah.
that's what I was referencing there.
But it's so good because I think, we know that you will inspire other people, to
Mhm.
dig deep and try to find what they can, but then consider who they're researching and the time and the
Right,
place and their
right.
lives and connect things where you can in ways that are logical. So it's a little poetic license. Tim would
Mhm.
be pleased. But
Yeah.
you're doing justice and honoring, your
Well,
family.
thank you very much. I mean, one story, and I didn't know how this would be received by the family, but it would, and fast forward, they love it, which
Yay.
is
Which is a huge concern for people that write things that are memoir-ish,
right,
right? Yeah.
right. And in particular, without giving away too much in the book, but the ill-intending priest that was very hot on his and
Yeah.
his companion who he escaped with's trail. And that's why my grandfather was smart enough to try to go to a part of the city where no priest would be, or cops, were overwhelmed with other things. So he ran to the red light district. And
Mhm.
man, oh man, I tell you, to this day, he talked about how a kind-hearted lady who ran a brothel and a kind-hearted saloon keeper, they kept him alive. They gave him a job. He didn't want any handouts ever. And he
Yeah.
swept up, he cleaned the place. And the name of the saloon was Mushmouth Saloon and Emporium. And it was a real place. And I found it in a map and put the map in the book, which again, that was another moment where my head exploded.
Yeah.
Um, like, wow, Mushmouth, there it is. But they had bare knuckle boxing, and my grandfather could sing, and he would sing little Irish songs in between rounds, and they'd throw pennies at him. That was his paycheck. And so part of that, he he immersed himself and hid with sadly all the other orphans that lived on the
Mm-hmm.
streets. It was
Mm-hmm.
not an epidemic, but it was a big problem at that time of the world, and in Chicago. And what what he ended up doing was staying there until it was time to move on. And part of it, here's a perfect example. He was a 14 year old boy, and not around schoolgirls or school kids, and didn't have fortnightly where we go to a dance and you can
Right.
giggle with your buddies, and the girls would giggle, and you'd throw a snowball, and that's how you got people's attention or whatever. This
Yeah.
poor guy was spending time in a brothel, and I'm quite sure fell in love, whether it was love or not. And I told
Mm-hmm.
that story, just that's a human story, and
Mm-hmm.
that's my educated guess.
Mm-hmm.
And also I was able to tell the story of the incredible sad story of the ladies who were prostitutes at that
Mm-hmm.
time, and how they were taken advantage of. And it's just an awful thing, but that's,
Mm-hmm.
Chicago was known for that. And during the Columbus Exposition, that was a regular stopping ground. People would
Yeah.
check it out, and that's just the way of life. And I wanted to tell a fictitious lady's story and get her
Mm-hmm.
perspective too, that she was trying to survive herself. And
Yeah.
we all judge, right, until you
Mm-hmm.
walk a mile in their shoes, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But you did that so beautifully, kind of, you talk about it now like it was nothing, but that's really, an incredibly difficult thing to do. So we're desperate to know, what are you writing next?
Oh wow, I got
Yes.
something awesome that I really
What?
yeah, I'm not there yet, but it's calling on my background as a lawyer. And yeah, that's all we need, another lawyer story. But I am so excited about this. And I'll tell you guys at the appropriate time all about it. But yeah, no, I'm totally immersed on this, on
Yay.
and loving what I'm doing, promoting this book now. But
Oh.
yeah, so I'm not.
I'm so
Wow.
glad to hear that.
Yes, and you have to promise to come back when we
Yeah.
have
Oh, you got it.
more
You
to talk
got it.
about.
Yes. Well,
Oh
you
my
guys are wonderful, and I really, like I said, I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you for all your hard research and prep on this. It's
Oh,
humbling to be in this position. This is all new to me,
Yeah.
and
yeah.
I love it. So
Yeah.
thank you so much.
I
Our
love
pleasure.
it. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, it's so great to meet you too. Hope to see you again soon.
You
Wow.
Next
too,
book.
you too.
Right.
Yes. Thank you,
Fantastic.
Bob.
Bye.
All right. Thank you, ladies. Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you for listening. Our music is composed for Sharing the Heart of the Matter by the exquisitely talented duo of Jack Canfora and Rob Koenig. For show notes and more great inspiration, please visit our site at sharingtheheartofthematter.com.